So even though we had to wait an extra week for this chapter, I think the result, the value, and everything within it was well worth it. Because the Shibuya arc is coming to a conclusion, all of these ties are starting to run off into completely different directions to not only introduce new characters, new abilities, the new world, but more specifically concluding old ones. So you can pretty much feel that we're at the finishing line for this arc, and it's been such an incredible reading experience every single week. But obviously we still have some curveballs in play. The biggest one that a lot of us, or I think a majority of us, were waiting for was the return of Yuta, or at least a powerful character which fell more so in line with Yuta because of pretty much how he's been referenced throughout the story, the subtle impact that he has, but also the value that he brings back into the story, introducing the third years, potentially the unknown fourth years, and everything surrounding him. So a lot of us thought or basically expected him to return, and the possibility is still potentially there, but this chapter was pretty much it. I'm definitely not upset. I'm actually more so impressed that Akutami, the author, has managed to subvert that expectation just a little bit and reintroduce a very vital and important character back within the story. Someone that has been lingering for quite a bit but plays a massive, I think, turning point or a mental progression for Geto specifically regarding his flashback, his progress back within the day, the very vital change in mindsets. She played a very massive role, and that was Yuki. Yuki is one of the 4 special grade sorcerers. She is extremely powerful. She also taught Todo, and her coming back into the story brings forth a lot of different questions. So as much as she has replaced Yuta specifically, I'm definitely not upset. I think she's a great character. It's about time we got more from her and exploring her ideology, what her beliefs are, because she sat in a very weird position with that Geto situation, and this chapter doesn't necessarily bring any sort of clarity to her position and where she stands within the Jujutsu Kaisen world and regarding its politics, but it does put a little bit of those suspicions at ease. I don't think it completely lays them to rest, but the idea that she was potentially the traitor, or she's someone evil, or she's working with curses or something along those lines, and the reason why she put those thoughts into Geto's head so long ago somewhat eases off a bit as she comes back to completely confront the biggest individual within this current moment, which is obviously Geto. My apologies for somewhat running into a long-winded segment, but the beginning of this chapter is also very interesting. There's a lot of ways I feel like you could perceive this. You could either completely overthink it and blow it out of proportion, which is perfectly fine to do. You can also undershoot it and not really give it much attention whatsoever, or you can somewhat play the middle ground and be open to different interpretations or ideas. Chozo is becoming a very valuable character, and I'm kind of hoping Akutami keeps him around. I would love to see him thrive within the story and continuously blur that line between curse and human, very similar to how Mahito was. But more importantly, it builds upon the relationship and plays a little bit more on Chozo's mental state and his emotions, more specifically towards Yuji. There's something very important here in terms of his technique and understanding, or at least being able to acknowledge anomalies within his brothers or people connected to him by blood. So when his brothers died, he felt it, or when they got severely injured, I assume he could also feel it. But the important thing here is that he could also feel it with Yuji. This isn't just some memory manipulation on Yuji's end, which is something that has becoming a lot more of a prevalent thing. This is something that has managed to affect Chozo's own technique, where his cursed womb brothers that shared a portion of his blood that he was inherently linked or connected to, where he could feel the effects and things that they were going through. Yuji is now a part of that, and it kind of goes back to the idea of being able to overthink it and undershoot it. Wherever you sit is perfectly fine. There's a lot of different things here. It could be rather complex, or it could be pretty simplistic in design, but Yuji with his memory manipulation has been a very interesting thing, and I love the way that Akutami is playing upon it, making it more of a prominent thing, but taking it and bringing all these brand new concepts surrounding it. It's not just a one-dimensional thing. It now has these offshoots of directions that it's going in that make you question the legitimacy of it. Is this genuinely memory manipulation, or is there something else here? Is Yuji himself something else entirely? And I definitely have my own theories and ideas that I may potentially make a video on in terms of more so the origin of Yuji, what he may have been born to be, and his family line. There's realistically not all too much information surrounding it, so it's very open-ended and up in the air in terms of theory crafting and whatnot. So if I ever get around to doing it, it may be a miracle, but more so I kind of just want to wait for more information to come out that at least somewhat points into one of those directions a little bit further. I personally dislike creating or indulging in theories that have absolutely no groundwork for them whatsoever. So unless I can create that groundwork, only time will tell. But the connection between these two is getting very strong, and the whole chapter itself is followed up with some absolutely beautiful choreography. For me, this is some of the best fighting I've seen within manga in quite a bit of time, and admittedly I'm not reading all too much weekly stuff, but Kaizen's choreography and how chaotic but clear cut it can also be is extremely enthralling. And it obviously depends on what characters are going at it, but the amount of accuracy, the amount of abilities that come out in between that don't overpower or overthrow the fighting choreography, or the hand-to-hand combat I should say, is extremely impressive. Being versatile, using movement and trying to outwit your opponent and not just trying to outpower them. Chozo is undoubtedly extremely impressive within this chapter. He goes hand to hand with both of the biggest hitters currently, with his Geto or Noritoshi and Urame. I believe that's somewhat how you pronounce their name, I'm not entirely sure. These two are definitely holding themselves back, which they even reiterate that they need to keep messengers alive, or at least one messenger alive. And while Geto is somewhat indifferent about the situation, because you know he could easily pull out some pretty massive abilities currently, he's definitely saving himself, keeping himself withdrawn from the fight and trying to back off from Chozo as much as possible. But then again, you have Urame, who's on a completely different wavelength and doing their best to absolutely obliterate the competition, and they bring out some amazing techniques that we haven't seen before. Someone that is very prominent in using ice, freezing the battlefield, and kind of adding another depth or layer to the curse techniques, which we actually haven't seen before. Obviously everyone recognizes that this ability and the usage for it is extremely high. Urame manages to subdue literally everyone in a matter of seconds because of this ice and how incredibly dangerous it can be. It's not just a frozen in place type thing, it's more so if you get frozen and move too drastically, your body's going to rip apart from one another. It's a very detrimental ability, and seeing the artwork reflect it was extremely beautiful. I'm excited to see this character be brought up as another massive hitter within the story, which is what this chapter pretty much lays the groundwork for. Urame, Noritoshi, Sukuna are obviously all in cahoots, and they have this massive ulterior motive and plan within motion. So of course, bringing Urame up as well, showcasing their abilities and what they're actually capable of, now they are a massive threat and someone not to be taken lightly. Obviously the techniques are incredible, the choreography is amazing. You have that one Kyoto student whose name I cannot remember for the life of me that rides the broomstick. Her attack gets absolutely just deflected and disrespected, which I thought was kind of funny. And Urame once again shows everyone what they are capable of, using the ice ability once again to completely freeze everyone and bring it all down on top of them. The amount of people that are currently fighting against Geto and Urame, and the fact that one ability has managed to ensnare everyone, that mind you isn't a domain by any means, and almost kill absolutely everyone, is extremely impressive, especially when you realize that there is a lot of powerful people here. Because even though we have seen a little bit of what Geto or Noritoshi is capable of, I think there's a little bit more here we can get from them, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see it with the upcoming Yuki fight, because she comes in and manages to stop Urame's ability. So everyone is somewhat free, and Yuki and Noritoshi or Geto are face to face currently, which is building up to be a very massive encounter, just from the factor that Yuki is someone that we know realistically nothing about in terms of her abilities and what she's capable of, if she has a domain or anything along those lines. All we know is that she's a very powerful individual, a special grade sorcerer, and someone not to be messed with lightly. Ending off the chapter like that is the best way to build so much anticipation for next week's chapter. And obviously I'm extremely excited to see what Akutami does. If this Geto and Yuki fight turns into something massive, but just everything we got within this chapter, as much as it seemed kind of simplistic in design and kind of getting through the motions, there was so much beauty within different moments. Chozo having so much attention to him and opening up to the chapter with a dialogue and his relationship with Yuji, not to mention the small comedic bits he brings throughout the chapter, telling Yuji to call him a big brother, which I thought was brilliant to somewhat split up these stressful, intense moments with that little bit of comedy that isn't over the top or even annoying. Plus it gives a whole lot more character and understanding towards Chozo. If you build that character up constantly like that, give them more attention, usually you would play upon them, or the complete opposite event, you would kill them off. So kind of I think either or with Chozo at the moment, which isn't really much of a crazy guess, it's more so one or the other, so you kind of cover both fields. I would love to see him become more of an importance within the main story, and just framed off this chapter, it seems to be going down that path, especially with his connection with Yuji. As much as I wish Yuta was the person getting reintroduced back into the story instead of Yuki, I'm happy with this result. I can 100% see that final panel with Yuta and everyone losing their minds completely. I think that would have been such an incredible way to do it, but once again, Akutami likes to divert the expectation and bring in someone else. Couldn't be more excited to see what she brings to the table and how much more we get from her. So with that being said, that is basically it. Let me know how you felt about the chapter. What were some of your favorite moments within it? Chozo, everyone fighting together, the choreography, Geto, the reintroduction of Yuki. A lot of amazing and different things here. So I would love to hear your thoughts. But I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.